There's one thing that we've recently seen in the science that we should really avoid at night, at least late at night, if we want to ensure a good night's sleep. Now, it's funny because you're probably thinking I'm going to talk about sugar. Now, sugar is definitely something you want to avoid before sleep as well, but this is one that flies in the face of a lot of recent stuff, even stuff that I've talked about. So when you learn how this actually affects sleep, a lot of things make sense. Now, one of the reasons that people have a hard time sleeping is these constant fluctuations in fluid in our body. So whether you're someone that ends up dealing with levels of dehydration and getting thirsty in the middle of the night, or you're someone that has to pee a bunch of times in the middle of the night, this all applies to you. Because even if you don't feel like you're thirsty, or you don't feel like you have to pee consciously, there are systems in place that make you wake up in an effort to solve the problem. So we're going to talk about this new science and how we can avoid it and what we can do properly to make it a non-issue. I put a link down below for Thrive Market if you want to check out a place to get all your groceries in one spot delivered to your doorstep. Plus, that link will save you 30% off your entire grocery order. So if you use Thrive Market, you can sort by different diet type. You can sort by keto, paleo, you can sort by sugar-free, gluten-free. It makes shopping super easy, super convenient, and then everything's delivered to your doorstep in just a couple of days. So it ends up being A, cheaper than a lot of grocery stores, but B, saves you a ton of time, and C, extra inexpensive if you're using that 30% off discount link. Plus, you get a free $50 gift when you use my link in that description down below. So just below this video, top line of the description, you'll see a link for Thrive Market, and you can use that to save 30% off your order. Now, don't hate me for saying that salt is something we should be limiting in the evening time. Okay, you know, if you've watched my channel, if you follow me, if you're a veteran of this channel, that I am all about salt. I feel like salt has been improperly demonized. I feel like it gets roped into these like bodies of demonized foods that really just, it's not really the problem. But if we understand what salt can do to our fluid balance, a lot of this newer research makes sense. So there was a 2023 study, brand spanking new stuff, that took a look at a lot of people. Took a look at 488,000 participants over the course of 12.3 years. Okay, they looked at multiple sleep apnea events, almost 7,000 sleep apnea events. And they found those that added more salt to their evening meals tended to have poorer sleep and more sleep apnea or sleep breathing disturbances. Now, that doesn't really answer everything, right? Because people that would add salt to their food might also be eating sugary foods. It's just the type of person that maybe just really wants to add more taste. But if we look at some more data and we understand the mechanisms, it makes sense. There was a study published in Endocrine Abstracts that had subjects go 5 nights without adding any salt to their food, and then they monitored their sleep. And then they went 5 nights with adding a ½ gram of salt for every 10 kilograms of body weight. That was a hefty amount of salt. They did this at 8 p.m. shortly before bed. They found that when the salt was added, their slow wave sleep decreased, their sleep onset latency increased, took them longer to fall asleep, their nor-REM sleep decreased, their REM sleep decreased, and the next day they were overall less satisfied with their sleep. So across almost all markers, sleep quality diminished. What is going on here? Is salt terrible? Should we not be having it? I don't think that's the case at all. I want to give you solutions that you can apply here. For proper hydration, you don't want to be pounding a bunch of salt and a bunch of water all at once. You want to have a strategy to kind of take it in. Dr. Andy Galpin and Dr. Andrew Huberman talk about this specifically. Like, they have a specific ratio that they even talk about. I don't know what it is offhand, but basically you want to rehydrate at a certain level. It's hard for your body to take in too much water or too much salt at one sitting. So if you have a really salty meal at night, this can lead to dehydration. And naturally, we tend to eat salty foods at night, and then we tend to not drink enough water at night because we typically don't drink water at night because we don't want to wake up to pee. But what ends up happening is if you have a high amount of salt without adequate hydration, you end up dehydrated. And when you end up dehydrated, it's much more complicated than just, oh, I don't have water, I'm not going to pee, I'm not going to sweat. No, sometimes you end up peeing more. You can end up dehydrated because your body's signals are telling you to urinate more, even though you are adequately replenishing. So something is happening with the blood volume changes, the blood pressure changes, and the circulatory changes by having copious amounts of salt at night. And what's interesting is if you think about eating out at a restaurant or anything like that at night, you typically don't sleep as good that night. Could it possibly be that there's too much salt in that food? One of the things that you could do is try tapering your salt as the day goes on. And you're probably thinking, okay, this is just total nonsense, gobbledygook, right? Except it's very easy to test out. And if it doesn't work, what are you out? One night? You might notice it as quickly as 1 or 2 nights of limiting your salt at night and stacking your salt higher in the morning. It makes more sense to consume salt and water earlier in the day and taper it as the day goes on than the opposite. A lot of times, especially if we're people that are fasting or anything like that, we're hydrating throughout the day, but not adding electrolytes, we're not getting salt in the day, and then all of a sudden we're bombarding our body with a bunch of sodium at night, disrupting blood volume and blood pressure and the circulatory response and ultimately oxygen delivery. The other thing we have to look at with the sleep apnea side of things is that if you have a bunch of salt at night, you run the risk of having more fluid building up in your upper abdomen when you lay on your back or lay on your side. This fluid, although it doesn't seem like much, this retention can put pressure on your respiratory system, on your lungs, making you at higher risk for a sleep apnea event if you're already prone to that. Now, additionally, let's say you have a bunch of salt at night and then you have a bunch of water at night. If you're not active because you're going to bed, your body is going to counter-regulate a lot of this. So it's going to increase what is excreted. So you might find if you have a higher salt meal, even if you didn't have a ton of water, you get up to pee 1, 2, sometimes 3 or 4 times per night. That's not normal. It may be normal to you, but that's not normal. That is disrupting your sleep. So I encourage you to try this. Try front-loading your day with salt, taper it as the day goes on, try to have a lower salt meal in the evening, and hydrate as much as you can up until a couple hours before bed. Also, sip throughout the day with electrolytes. Don't pound all at once. It can make a huge difference in your hydration through the night, which changes your sleep. I'll see you tomorrow.